Hey guys, how's everyone doing? This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and welcome back to Sentinel Reviews. Today we are looking at the final Doctor Who 2024 special, the Christmas special, The Church on Ruby Road, written by Russell T Davies, directed by Mark Tonderai. Tonderi, I've only seen it written, so if I mispronounce your name and you somehow stumble across this, excuse me please. As always, because I do these unscripted, there is a blanket spoiler warning in place. Because, so if you do not want to be spoiled, then The Church on Ruby Road internationally is available on Disney Plus, and if you live in the UK, it is available on BBC iPlayer. God, I miss the New Year's Day specials. I think for me, overall, this is the weakest of the 2023 specials. Did I say 2024 earlier? Excuse me. So, overall, the specials, my ranking. At the bottom is The Church on Ruby Road. And then it's The Star Beast, and then it's The Giggle, and then Wild Blue Yonder was the strongest. And I still had one big issue with Wild Blue Yonder. But enough about that. There are so many places I want to go with this, including a rant that I am going to save until towards the end because, oh boy, that took me out of the episode. I got so viscerally angry at that scene. But before I get to all of that, derivative is the word of the day here. It's just, when he was first announced as the next showrunner, I wanted to say new, but yeah, the next showrunner, Russell T Davies promised he had all of these new ideas. He wanted to propel Doctor Who forward. He had all of these new ideas and all of these new plans. And despite my issues, it looked like the 60th anniversary specials were propelling a lot of those new ideas forward. So The Church on Ruby Road can be summed up as same old, same old. There are so many plot beats or elements that play out like episodes from Davies' first era as showrunner. And that's just really disappointing. I think the episodes people are most comparing this to are Rose and the Christmas Invasion, because they're both because all three of those episodes all kind of have to do the same thing. They have to introduce a new Doctor, Christopher Eccleston, David Tennant, and Ncuti Gatwa, and they have to introduce their new era as well. I think this one is the strongest of his introductions, but, because the Christmas Invasion decided, we have to introduce an entirely new Doctor. What do? I got it. Let's put him out of commission for most of the episode, and not worry about it. Sorry, that was a bit of a tangent, but I feel like of those three introductory episodes, this is easily the strongest one. No. Rose is stronger. Sorry, I am rambling now, so let's try to get back on track. But as I was saying, sadly, despite all these promises of new ideas and new approaches, this just feels derivative of so much of RTD's first era, in both in general tone and style, but even specific plot elements, like our villains, the goblins, more on them in a second. They operate on a science based on luck and coincidence. Much like how the Carrionite, and not an actual science like math and science. Much like how the Carrionites in the Shakespeare Code operated on a science based on the power of words and language. Unlike the Shakespeare Code, though, the science of luck and coincidence that the goblins operate on doesn't feel fully formed. It does not feel fully fleshed out. It just feels like a throwaway line that the Doctor can say he's fascinated by it, and then no more thought is given to it beyond that. Speaking of, the goblins are a very underwhelming villain. There is some good effects going on them. I'm surprised how much of it was practical looking at the behind the scenes stuff. I thought more of it was CG than it ended up being. But that being said, the Goblin King was surprisingly disappointing. That was all practical and it looked cool, but its movement lacked realism. it just kind of sways side to side and turns, and it opens and closes its mouth. Like, it is so painfully obvious that it is just an animatronic. And they could have done something to hide that better. Like, just to make a comparison, Fugitive of the Jadoon. The Jadoon masks obviously had improved electronics, especially when you looked at the mouth movements. And it's just, there was a realism that those improvements really lended to the Jadoon, that the Goblin King just lack. I will say, because I am kind of going all over the place in this review, that I like that Christmas is not a central element of this story. I feel like in the past, the worst Christmas specials tried so hard to make Christmas very central to the story, And I think the better ones in general just happened to be set at Christmas or had a little bit of a Christmas flair to it, but they weren't trying so obnoxiously to make Christmas part of it. Like, my favorite Christmas special, I think the best one, honestly, is The Husbands of River Song. And this one does that. Like, it just happens to be taking place at Christmas. There's a bit of a Christmas flair, in the decor in the background and stuff, but Christmas is not central to the story being told. So, what are some other elements that are good here? Ncuti Gatwa is amazing. I am kind of sad we don't get the post-regenerative trauma, probably because of the bi-generation. So the 15th Doctor comes out fully formed. I like his energy. Gatwa has an insane charisma in his performance. He's really charming, and just seeing him get fascinated by things was fun to watch. He has a really good chemistry with Millie Gibson as Ruby Sunday. I almost wanted to call her Ruby Road too. But yeah, speaking of Millie Gibson, also good. But I noticed that, surprisingly, in this special, Ruby is kind of underdeveloped. And I'm sure once Series 14 begins, I will not be going with the flow and calling it rebranded Season 1. It is Series 14. But Ruby seems kind of underdeveloped here. Like, we get little hints of what her character will be, but I imagine a lot of that will be saved for Series 14. But just from what we got here, Millie Gibson gives a much stronger performance than what Ruby Sunday is written as on paper. Like, again, I'm going to make another comparison. The War Doctor. If you look at how he's portrayed on paper, not what's said about him, because what's said about him is very different from what we ever actually see. He's kind of generic. What makes him work is John Hurt's performance. It's the performance elevating the material, and that is the same case with Millie Gibson. Just, again, to repeat myself, the performance is better than the material provided. And on top of that, her performance chemistry with Gatwa is amazing. In that regard, I've been seeing people compare her to Clara. I don't know if I'm prepared to do that, even though, shock of all shocks, uber important plot device. But more on that in a moment, because that might be tied up to the rant I'm getting to. And I like Ruby's family. I like her foster mother, Carla. I love her grandmother, Cherry. They are both insanely fun. And, while I don't like when Doctor Who gets so domestic, I do hope we get a little bit more of them, just because I like the energy they brought. I like their relationship with Ruby. And I like that how this is how we see a family. Like, we're kind of doing a found family kind of thing. And then this will also be tied to my rant. So, yeah, I think the plot is paper thin. It's trying to play on... I feel like it was trying to play on that idea, of changelings. When a fairy kidnaps a human child and leaves their fairy child behind. It doesn't ultimately go there. I feel like that's what it's leaning for. It's, again, the plot is paper thin. The goblins are an underwhelming villain, but Gatwa and Gibson are great. There's ultimately not a lot to say. So let's just get to the big thing. The thing that effectively kills this episode for me. And I know in the past I've had little nitpicks like this where, I've talked about one scene that really bugs me. but it hasn't been enough to affect my enjoyment of the episode. Here it does. So when I reviewed The Star Beast, I kind of noticed this unfortunate trend developing. Russell T Davies is trying to be socially conscious and aware of the fact that this is the 21st century and how we view things and how our view of things have changed. And he's trying to be aware of that and be proactive in, being progressive. Sorry, I don't know why I had so much difficulty saying that. The problem lies in his execution. And he keeps doing this. The first big thing was Power of the Doctor. He did not have David Tennant regenerate into Jodie while still wearing Jodie Whittaker's costume. And he said because he was worried this would lead to outdated drag humor. I don't think, even after he made these comments, I don't think I ever saw anyone making these jokes. Plus, I could argue that the 13th Doctor's costume is androgynous enough it wouldn't have been an issue. And then we got the Children in Need special, Destination Scarrow, which, showed a disfigured Davros. And then in the behind the scenes, Russell T Davies said this was the Davros of 2023. Now, we'll see what happens, because again, like I think I've said, I don't remember. Children in Need specials have seldom had any bearing on the actual series, but Davies, it sounded like that if Davies does a Davros story, this is how he's going to depict Davros. Again, we just don't know what's going to happen there. Now, just based on his comments, I get the intention. Sorry, 1 second, my laptop's dying. I get what you're going for, Davies. The evil cripple trope is problematic. It is ableist. But to take a character who has always been portrayed as disabled and then suddenly say they are not disabled and suddenly portray them as not disabled, that is also ableist. And then it happened again in The Star Beast. There is a way to establish your trans character is trans without ever having to dead name them. Like right after that scene too, we have that lovely scene of Sylvia just trying her best and getting a little flustered and confused, not wondering whether or not she's doing the right thing. You didn't need the scene of Rose Noble being dead named. Because people are saying, even if it is with the best of intentions, the dead naming scene as a trope is still transphobic. And we have, again, Russell T Davies trying something with the best of intentions and executing it terribly. We have it here. In possibly his worst offense so far. Okay, so spoilers. At the start of the third act, the Doctor and Ruby have escaped the goblins and saved the new kid Ruby's mother Carla is fostering named Lulabelle. And just to give you some background, Carla is this very bright, cheerful person. She's as an adopted mother, she's very clearly loved and nurtured Ruby, as well as fostering over 30 kids. She said 33. So after stopping the goblins decide to travel back and go after Ruby when she was a baby. So now the Doctor is in a new timeline where Ruby doesn't exist. The environment is very different. Carla says now that Lulabelle is only her 5th or 6th child. And she says she doesn't like fostering because it feels like work. But she does it for the money. Like she said, 800 quid a month. Now, I try to control myself. My rule of thumb when I make a video is, depending on the rating of the show or movie I'm reviewing, that is the language I'm going to use. Except for one instance, I have never broken that rule. I am going to break it here. Russell T Davies, what the fuck were you thinking? Yes, it is a very brief scene, but you are playing into the foster child foster parent only doing it for the money trope. A very problematic trope, and oftentimes really racist trope. And there are ramifications to the way this plays out. Because, again, in the timeline with Ruby, Carla fostered over 33 children. In this timeline without her, she's only fostered 5 or 6. You are saying that Carla's outlook changed, that she became this bright, cheerful person who loves fostering children and nurturing and taking care of them. You are saying this changed because this woman of color took in and raised a white girl. Again, I am sure the horrific ramifications of the scene were unintentional, because obviously Russell is going for a found family, or portraying that families aren't what they used to be, and family can really be anything, and I love that. But when you come up with a scene like this, after you cast someone, after you cast the parts for this, you need to look over your script again and make sure that intention still comes across. You need to make sure that your script now fits the actors you have cast, because otherwise you just get a scene that is horrifically racist like this. It paints Ruby as unintentionally again, as a white savior. And not to mention too, it leans into this trope in New Who that the Chibnall era did away with, and I was happy with that. It leans into this trope of the companion being an uber mega important plot device. Like, she has massive importance to the universe. Russell, sorry. Again, it is a very brief scene that, because it's taking place in an altered timeline that gets fixed, shouldn't matter, but just, it pissed me off. I have never been so viscerally angry at a single scene before. Enough that it ruins an episode for me. But it did. And then, too, there are just other things about this I don't like. So now, Russell T Davies is doing a mystery box plotline again. But now we have 3. So, from the 60th anniversary specials, and I just want to say this too, David Tennant didn't even know what these were, which means it's going to be a thing in Gatwa's era. So we have the boss / the one who waits. And then we have Ruby's parentage, which, that ticked me off. Like, I liked that after the Doctor saved Ruby as a baby, he chose not to go after her mother. Because, it's going off his own feelings as the timeless child, which he brought up in this episode again. It doesn't, where I came from doesn't matter. All that matters is who I am now. I liked that the Doctor did not go after Ruby's mother. And then behind the scenes, RTD said, that's gonna be a thing. And then we have Ruby's neighbor, Mrs. Flood, as well. I thought it would have just been a fun, cheeky little fourth wall break, but nope. Again, behind the scenes, Russell T Davies said, that's gonna be a thing. Davies, you are juggling 3 mystery boxes that may or may not be linked. I'm sorry, the Church on Ruby Road. Despite Davies' promise of going in a new direction with Doctor Who, it is sadly derivative of his previous work. And just the way it has laid the path for this new era, it has kind of killed my excitement for it. Ncuti Gatwa is great. Ncuti Gatwa and Millie Gibson have a really strong introduction, and they are honestly the best thing about this episode. But honestly, since the announcement that Russell T Davies was the showrunner, my thoughts ultimately have not changed. I'm excited for Ncuti Gatwa. I am not excited for Russell T Davies. But those are just my thoughts. Have you seen The Church on Ruby Road? What are yours? Please start a conversation in the comments below. Remember to like, comment, subscribe. Click the bell next to subscribe to get notifications when I upload. And in the description box below, you'll find the link to my social media presence, where you can follow me and get updates on the channel. This is Sir Jedi Sentinel, and I'll see you guys next time.